You know that phrase that goes, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me"? That's bullshit. Contrary to popular belief, children between the ages of 2 to 10 years of age are dramatically affected by the words that their parents tell them, by the words that their parents say. Emotional abuse, verbal abuse. This morning, around 11 o'clock, I was dead asleep, and I woke up to some very, very loud noises. And these noises consisted of particular family members of mine screaming very, very loudly. Now, me being myself, when these types of situations arise, I stay in my room and I try to avoid it at all costs. I may be almost 22 years old, but if there's one thing that still affects me to this very day, it is when people who you care about or people in your family fight. And I don't mean just a fight like an argument, I mean an actual verbal type of emotional conflict that is very, very hurtful, and words are said, people are angry, and people are screaming at the top of their lungs. It's a very toxic environment. And to this day, growing up, witnessing some of that, it still has affected me. It's something that I try to avoid and something that I try to stay away from, and I will do anything to avoid it. I've at times completely left the house and went off to a friend's house for the whole day just to avoid that type of conflict, to avoid that type of environment. It's not healthy for anyone, no matter what age. But this video is primarily speaking of children, because these family members of mine have a child. And I want to stress the importance, I'm not a parent yet. I hope to one day have children, but I'm not a parent yet. But just because I'm not a parent doesn't mean that I can't give sound advice on the issue of parenting, in my opinion. And one of the things a lot of people don't realize when they have children is that when you have conflicting arguments, when a father or a mother argue with one another, and that child is in the center of that argument, that affects the child emotionally, psychologically, socially. That type of toxic environment when mommy and daddy, or mom and mom, or dad and dad just hammer it at one another, whether it's calling each other names or profanity or whatever, screaming at the top of their lungs, whether it's physical abuse or verbal abuse, that affects the child's social development. It affects the child's mental health. It affects the child's psychology. And it seems to me that a lot of newer parents in this generation don't understand that at all. Even in my own family. And it's wrong. Completely wrong to have a 3-year-old sit in the middle while parents argue back and forth. And the crazy thing is that I've witnessed this with my own eyes, is that I may have a 3-year-old nephew, but I've seen how it affects him. His mood at 3 years old, they can only say a limited amount of words, but at 3 years old, you can see his attitude and his personality, how it changes when mommy and daddy are fighting, when mommy and daddy are not getting along, when mommy and daddy had a divorce and they separated, and he wants his father and his mother, but they're separated. They don't talk to one another. That affects a child. Divorce, whether people like to admit this or not, divorce affects children. It really does. It affects teenagers. It affects even adults. Like if my mom and dad got divorced right now, that would affect me greatly. And a big thing about childhood development is when you have conflict like that and the child is in the middle, it affects them, as I've already mentioned, but it can create a sense of worthlessness for that child. That child can grow up thinking he is the cause from father and mother fighting. He's the person that if it wasn't for him, mom and dad would get along. And so therefore that child, with all this dysfunction around him, starts to blame himself and says that there wouldn't be family conflict. Mom and dad would love each other. Mom and dad wouldn't have gotten divorced if it hadn't been for me. If it hadn't been for me being born. And that's completely wrong. But it's a feeling that many young men and young women at younger ages go through, and that can transfer even into their teenage years and even to their adult years. One of the biggest things about childhood development is having parents that you can trust. And when you're 6, 7, 8 years old and your parents don't trust one another, who do you go to? What does that child do? He starts to look at himself and says that he's the problem when he's not. And not only that, when that child grows up into his teenage years and tries to have relationships, that baggage that he was fed, that he fed into himself, that I'm the problem, mom and dad can't trust anybody, he's going to have trust issues with his future relationship, because abuse by a primary caregiver fundamentally affects that child in a dramatic way for the negative. Children at a young age and even teenagers need to have a safe place in which they can express their emotions. And being abused, whether it be verbally or physically, being in the center of the fights all of the time, witnessing mom and dad or dad and mom fight over and over again and hate each other's guts. Children need predictability, structure, clear boundaries, and knowledge and assurance that their parents are looking out for their safety and will not put that child in harm's way. And usually, in most cases, harm's way is right in the middle of their fights and right in the middle of the arguments, and I witnessed this today. The ultimate goal of this video is to address one main point. If you are going to become a parent or are a parent, that when situations arise that emotions and anger and words and physical or verbal abuse is going to be thrown back and forth, that you need to remove that child, whether that child is dropping them off at someone's house or a babysitter, or you have to get your child out of that toxic or argument that's going to occur, and go do it privately. Do it in a place where that child is not going to witness your actions and your words, because I do sincerely believe that when you fight with your significant other and that child is stuck in the middle, that is a form of emotional abuse. And that child is going to be affected psychologically, socially, and mentally for that childhood development for the rest of his life, witnessing that. And it can affect a child greatly, traumatically, and negatively for the rest of his life. And it can create other problems in the future, even when they're an adult, with self-blame, thinking that the divorce or whatever happened was somehow his fault, and he's the person to blame for that. And by removing that child from these types of situations, assuming that you're a responsible parent enough to do that, rather than have the child witness you fight, is something that I think people need to do. And that's why I wanted to make this video, just simply making the point that it greatly affects a child. Before I end this video, if you are a young child or a teenager or even adult watching this video, I want to make it really clear and assure you, the viewer right now watching this, is that it's not your fault for whatever abuse happened in your life, whether it be verbal or emotional abuse. It isn't, and growing up you may have had a difficult childhood. You may have witnessed families fighting, your parents' divorce. And I do understand that can create a lot of insecurity and a lot of issues in regards to self-blaming yourself for your parents divorcing. And you're not the cause of that. You're not. What you had to witness growing up or endure was your parents' responsibility, and they did a shitty job if you endured emotional abuse or even physical abuse, or was in the middle of all that conflict and you had to watch your parents divorce. They're irresponsible because they didn't do it right. And now here you are in your teenage years or even adult years thinking that you are the cause of the problem, or that you don't have any value, you're not worthy of any respect because of what happened between your parents when you were younger. And that's not the case. You deserve respect and you have value whether or not your parents divorced, whether or not you were emotionally or physically abused. You are a human being, you have the value, you deserve to be respected, and it was not your fault. Do not blame the actions of the irresponsible on yourself, because when you do that, it affects you in a very negative way, and can be harmful to you.